the idea with this, right, is there's I have and Adam has, right. We both have this kind of curiosity, right, about where people started out in our industry, and the kind of memories that you have of that time, and even the kind of when you first knew that this is what you want to do, like when you want to get into production or into advertising or into just our industry in general. And I always loved those kind of conversations that we'd have. Most of the time it was, over a Guinness and a whiskey at the Toucan or whatever. And obviously COVID has just annihilated all those kind of chats. So this production podcast is really like us talking to kind of people in our industry, the advertising industry, producers, directors, and everyone in between. And it's a kind of a natural
Brilliant.
Curiosity into like, well, where did you start and all that. And so that's the idea with it. We don't prepare any questions or anything really, but we just kind of have a chat.
Because you know what it's like, Chris, like everyone usually asks you about the work and like how you do it and how you achieve it. And I think ultimately we all know like you achieve it by just working with great people who want to do great craft and diving in. But what you often don't know is, well, how did you get there and what hurdles did you have to jump over to be the guy sat in the chair talking at me saying, okay, this is how we're going to get this done,
And like we spoke to Tim Katz at Knucklehead there last week, and he just gave this really he gave this nice story all about the very first shoot he was on, when he was a kid, just out of kind of school really, and he just said he within the first hour of being on a set for the very first time, he knew this is where he wanted to be. Period. Like this is what was for him, and he just knew it straight away. I quite like that. But what do you kind of remember when you think back, like either pre-college or post school, or what was your what are your early memories of that time of thinking, oh, I want to work in production, or your kind of first job on set? Like, what do you remember about all that?
I remember sort of growing up, I was quite aware of, I suppose, the world of brands and advertising quite early. My dad worked in marketing in the whiskey business.
I feel like we should just stop there. Like that's it. Like let's dive in.
Yeah, so he was heavily involved in whiskey marketing and alcohol, spirits marketing generally, and so I always was quite aware. And he used to be involved with Diageo, so Johnny Walker and Smirnoff, and some of the like the real sort of golden age of Smirnoff advertising. And I remember probably slightly unhealthily as like a 10-year-old having Smirnoff posters on my walls, but being quite kind of engaged with the visuals of it, not really understanding really like what the drinks were or anything, but just being really captivated by the imagery. But then after that, my plan was, it was never a conscious decision to get into it, actually. Originally, my plan was to get into science, and right up through to, through my A-levels. Then I went to university, and I was doing a degree in zoology with French in Manchester. And that was sort of my sort of academic path, I suppose. And on the side of that, throughout my teens, I really got involved with music production and DJing, and was doing a lot of that kind of thing just as a passion. Spent a lot of time like DJing out in clubs, making mixtapes, producing. What I would later learn was kind of like producing music, although I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. And but so that was always something I did on the side, and then I started picking up a camcorder. So obviously it was pre sort of video phones and stuff. So I was always the friend in my friendship group had a camcorder when we went like interrailing or went on snowboard trips or something. I'd be like filming or just doing stupid videos, and that was in the very, very early days of YouTube. So it's probably like 2003, somewhere around there. And whilst I was at uni, I kind of fell slightly out of interest with zoology, and I ended up, because I was doing languages as part of my degree, I ended up doing a year abroad. And you can either go and study, or you can go and do an internship somewhere. And I didn't really want to go and study, and I ended up trying to get a job, and ended up in Paris getting a job at a radio station called Radio Nova, which was amazing radio station.
I bet you were like as well. Like this totally ties into one of my passions already. What with the music
100%.
production.
I was like, okay, I want to do something in music. I ended up getting this sort of job as a runner at this radio station. And part of what they did was so they had the radio station, but they also had like an advertising sync department. So I started to like help them out with doing music searches for commercial projects and stuff like that. And then I ended up through that getting another running job at JWT in Paris in the production department. And really, it was that point where that was the moment where I was like, oh, this is how it all works. This can be a career where you can just do this all the time and get paid to make these films. And that was a bit of a light bulb for me.
Yeah, this isn't zoology anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's when I came back, finished my degree, but in pure French. I dropped the zoology, and at the time, then I didn't really know the ecosystem of the industry. I didn't really quite get to grips with, this is what agencies do, production companies do, and so on. I was just like, I just want to get into production. So I ended up applying to grad schemes at loads of different agencies, and ended up actually on the grad scheme at BBH. And actually most grad schemes at the time, there was no grad scheme for production. There was no kind of obvious way in. So I was like, I'll just get into an agency anywhere I can. I got this position on the grad scheme at BBH into account management. No idea what account management was, but I was like, I'll give it a try. And actually in hindsight, it was a really good way of getting into stuff, because it gave me a very sort of thorough understanding of all the different facets of how a campaign's made, gave me a sort of working understanding of strategy, of sort of the business drivers from clients, like very kind of holistic understanding of how it all works. And I did that. I was working on Lynx, body spray, Lynx effect stuff for a couple of years as an account man.
What age were you at this stage, Chris?
So I was 22, 23.
Right, yeah.
So I came out of university from Manchester and started at BBH like 6 weeks later, and then ended up staying 10 years in the end.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where are you living at, 22, starting at BBH? Did you rent somewhere?
Yeah, I was living in a disgusting flat, just off Brick Lane, just horrendous. But having the time of my life,
But having done that style of degree, Chris, you must have known how much of a gross habitat that flat was.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like the bacteria that grew, and there was just always a mountain of nappies at the bottom of the stairwell from the family downstairs. It was horrific, but obviously having an amazing time. And and I was sort of working as a cameraman for 2 years, and then always during that time, the production was always the bit I was like, that's the bit I just always resonated with me. It's the bit I was most interested in. As I said, it was great to get a working knowledge of the rest of it, but it was always like the production bit, which I was like, no, that's really what I want to do. So I managed to transfer across into the production department, and I was lucky enough actually at the time to start assisting a guy called David Carbassian, who is now sort of president of commercials at Pulse Films, but at the time was kind of senior producer at BBH. And he was, and still is very much my mentor. And he really taught me, everything really. And I assisted him for a couple of years, and then went on to produce myself and sort of took it from there, but ended up staying at BBH for 10 years.
So my I got a couple of questions there, Chris, on that journey you just said. So my first question is, when you were a runner at, say, the radio station or over at JWT in Paris, what sort of duties would you do? So the reason I ask is this: when I started as a runner in a music studio, I was cleaning loos, making coffees, getting horrible food. But what were you doing back then? What were your duties?
Very much anything and everything. I mean, to be quite honest, in the morning it tended to be make people tea. In the afternoon, it tends to be roll people joints, which was basically how my day divided up. It was quite a bohemian sort of environment in Radio Nova at the time. And then, it was getting people lunch, cleaning toilets, running errands. You know, at the time it was funny. I was doing like a lot of music searching and music sync, but it was obviously pre-Spotify, sort of early days of iTunes. So much of it either had to be running over to labels to pick up CDs, running to Fnac and buying stuff. You know, like it was all done through CDs. It was just like enormous racks of CDs. So I spent a lot of time digging through music, which obviously was just a dream. I mean, I was being paid nothing, but I didn't need to be paid. It was just amazing to do it.
It probably felt quite glamorous though, right?
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, I was, you know, kind of 20, 21. It was the first time, you know, like really being fully immersed in a professional environment. It was really captivating, actually, just being in there. But, you know, because as I was saying, they had the radio station, they had the music session. They also did quite a lot of like voiceover work, and, you know, had a sort of sound studio. And just seeing all the different people coming in for different sessions, understanding what they did, just being in that sort of creative environment. It was the first time I'd been all day, every day in somewhere where we're just like making stuff. What an amazing privilege to be able to do that. And it was really intoxicating. And yeah, it was then I was like, this is what I want to do. And I know I can be good at doing this as well. You know, it won't feel like work.
And that's like a real good gift if you're lucky enough to feel like that with your job. You know, you never work a day in your life. That's the saying, right?
100%. And I still feel like that, you know, like I still feel really privileged to do what I do. And I still feel really excited about what I do, you know, because the nature of what we do is we're always doing something we haven't done before. And it's like, what more really can you ask for? You know, like every day really is different, and I'm constantly learning, and I will constantly be learning, I'm sure, until the day I retire. You know, there's always new stuff to learn. There's always new people to work with. There's always new techniques to try. You know, you'll never conquer it. You'll never master it. Creativity is the number one driving force. There are obviously loads of driving factors around that, but the number one thing will be is creativity, you know. And I've been lucky enough to be able to work at places where that's been the case.
Intoxicating is a word that some people describe that feeling of when you're at work, you know, and in terms of what we do. And I totally feel the same way, you know, when you're I don't know whether it's getting on a plane or just getting a cab to a shoot, or just kind of sitting in an edit, or there's just a kind of an excitement there that's it's very hard to.
Totally. I mean, I remember I was lucky that my first shoot was it was actually a shoot for ITV, and it was directed by Rupert Sanders, down shooting in South Wales. But you know, for a first shoot, being on a set of that sort of scale and with that kind of level of talent, you know, I just remember driving down. I remember like it was my job to get like the hire car. You know, it was a tight budget, and so we weren't even taking the train. We were all driving down there, and I was driving my boss Dav down there. But I just remember, you know, it was like a road trip already. I was like, I would do this with my friends. This is already fun, and it's just an adventure. You know, going down South Wales somewhere I haven't been before, shooting on this beach. You know, working with people who I was fans of, you know, it was amazing. And that was a real privilege to do that as a first job. And as I say, I was lucky enough to be working at BBH and assisting Dav, and it meant that I was working on really amazing stuff really quite early, which, I never took for granted, but was amazing to be exposed to that stuff so quickly.
And also, Chris, like, you know, as you were saying, kind of, there's an excitement to the creativity and the people you kind of get to work with. I say, like, we're really lucky in our industry that, you know, a lot of the time the people we are inspired by, you know, we really respect and look up to. And like a great example is, and you know, for anyone listening, obviously you're head of production for Droga 5 and in London, and recently, you know, you guys collaborated with Thundercat to do recreate the Diet Coke jingle. Now, usually we wouldn't talk about projects, but as an example, like, how fucking cool is that? Like, in what other job would you be able to do that?
That's why. Yeah, totally. And that's why I really feel like we've got this amazingly privileged position. You know, we have access and resources to really affect culture. And how many people, have that opportunity? And I feel like it's a really important thing not to squander. That's why I love actually the role of agency producer, because you're in this position where, in theory, you can, try and work with anyone, and someone will probably at least pick up the phone to have a conversation about it. And actually, when you start thinking about the things you have at your disposal and how you can make best use of them, and think about it just as a punter, like what do I want to see brands doing to add cultural value? How can I facilitate that in my role? That's a really exciting and privileged position to be in. Outside of our industry, whether it's film or theatre or music or whatever, you can have, the best people, the best ideas, the best everything. And the hardest thing is always funding. Tends to be the hardest thing is finding finance to make things happen. And we, on the other hand, go into projects being like, we've got a budget, what should we do with it? And should never underestimate how amazing it is to have that at your disposal and use it in a way that is kind of culturally responsible, I suppose, and do things which otherwise wouldn't be able to happen. So, that Diet Coke project is a perfect example. It's like, Diet Coke has a foothold in culture already. It's got a legacy. You look back to what they were doing back in the 80s and 90s with, at the time, big music stars, Devo and Elton John and so on. It's like, how do we take that philosophy and take that DNA and bring it right up to date? And it's like, we have that capability. Let's do that in the most interesting way possible. And thankfully, he saw what we were trying to do with it, and he got it, and he saw the place that he could have in that legacy of the brand. And who knows, maybe we'll go on and do other versions with other artists. But
imagine you were in this scenario though, Chris, like you had that sort of brief from the client and they came to you and obviously I know nothing about budgets. I turn things up and down. But like, say they said to you, we've got £10,000, go and do something culturally crazy, right? As a producer, or as like an agency producer, as agency craves, immediately your brain's going, well, this might not be possible. Like, this is a no. But would you say there's always a way? And how would you encourage the team, or how would you sort of approach that kind of challenge? Because it is a challenge, right?
Yeah, I think I do think there's always a way. One of the things that is always useful to have on your side is the strength of an idea. And, thankfully working with David Kay and the creative teams at Droga, that's not something that I often struggle for, is the strength of an idea. And that is probably the best currency you can have. There's a source of pride in, I think, for agency producers, where, when you're working on a restricted budget and trying to get someone involved, whether it's a music artist, whether it's a director, whoever it is, I feel like there's a certain sense of pride in being able to spot next generation talent and, give them an opportunity so that you can look back and actually I contributed to making them become what they became. So that's another important role I think agency producers is talent spotting and being able to see things in people and, catch people just as they're about to blow up, or, give them that thing, see something in them and give them that opportunity which catapults them up to the next sort of rung. It's hugely fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, it's probably in many ways, is it how the relationship was for you at BBH, right? Like you just had somebody, and I think this maybe goes to the idea of managers or mentors. When you look back at your career, at those managers that really kind of inspired or kind of allowed you to grow compared to other managers, which we've all had, that didn't. And you just think, well, what made them? Like, what are the qualities of that guy at BBH? Like, what are the exact qualities? What just did he have that really allowed you to either be yourself or flourish or learn and grow? And there's a real quality in that, and there's a real talent in that, because that could have gone the other way. You could have gone out of there in a year, or you could have been
100%.
restricted.
100%. I think the thing that was, as I said, Dav taught me a lot. Just watching how he works, but also how he allowed me to work. And the thing that I immediately learned from him is when he is producing a job, completely absorbed and obsessed he is by that job. It's not something that he just is facilitating. It's like it's his thing, and there's a sense of, I saw with him and the best producers, you can look at their reel and see that producer in every bit of work they've done. You can see their fingerprints across everything, no matter what sort of tone or style. You can see there's a common denominator, because there's a real sense of ownership and of doing whatever it takes, any means necessary to make that thing the best thing it can possibly be. So I think he instilled in me this sense of sort of the reverence for what you're doing, and for giving it absolutely everything you've got, and protecting it when it needs to be protected, and so on. But also he gave me the space to be able to do that for my own jobs, and not try and impose his taste or his process on that. He just instilled in me the understanding of that's what needed to be done, but then let me do it in the way that works for me and not for him. And that's an amazing balance to strike, and something that I've tried to in my own way pass on to the team that I work with, because it's a tricky balance.
I mean, I've found it really nice that you said he was a mentor and he still is a mentor, because I often think, like, when you get to a certain point in your kind of career and your experience, you assume that mentee role, or that that mentor role, sorry, but it's also nice to think, well, who do I talk to when I need like a little kind of rain check, or someone to just say like, hey, have you thought about this? I think it's really important.
Definitely. I think it's essential that everyone has one. I don't think you can ever be too experienced or too old or anything, having someone who you can, run things by, just bend their ear on stuff completely objectively and without prejudice. It's so important.
Because often producers, you're doing your own thing. You're being able to just talk to another producer about something that you're unsure of, and getting their take on it can often just shine a completely different light on it. And
totally.
But what a fantastic, again, I was just thinking there about, there was a manager I had in one of my first jobs when I was kind of 21, 22, and he's still probably one of my kind of, he's actually, I would say he's one of my very good friends now, even though it's 20 years later kind of thing. But I think he had that similar kind of, just a similar kind of sense about him that you described. And I just remember feeling very empowered and very trusted and just enabled to kind of get on with it, but to do so with a sense of ownership and passion and I just never wanted to let him down.
Totally. I think that's the knack, isn't it? You can find there's some managers who kind of try and keep people held down or keep things suppressed, and there's others who just, all they're there to do is like lift people up, and you find someone like that, and it's
so look, on the other side of it, like the other scale of it, in advertising, there's often a tension, right, between creative and production, in the sense of an idea and the ability to achieve it and the time frame and whatnot. But how would you tackle a kind of a challenging situation, perhaps on set, or how do you deal with those inevitable moments where there's a tension there, and there's maybe no leeway either way?
Yeah, I mean, so much of the job is around diplomacy, because you're dealing with so many different people so many different personality types, so many different job roles with varying agendas, and trying to balance all of those things. It can be challenging times. You can definitely find yourself in challenging situations. I think on the whole, I feel like people respond well so long as they understand that you have their best intentions at heart, and I think the best producers can make everyone feel like they are working on their behalf and for their agenda, even if those agendas actually are can be quite different. The best producers, the creators will feel like the producer's really pushing the creative agenda. The client will really feel like the producer's pushing it to be the best it can be, but also respecting the constraints that they have. Everyone who's involved will have their own things they're worried about, and a lot of what the producer has to do is absorb those worries and find solutions which feel like they're going to accommodate all of those different worries, with everyone feeling sort of fulfilled. Things can get they can become really pressurized. One thing I was taught quite early actually by another producer at BBH, which again I've always carried with me, is if we're feeling like we're not quite there yet with a shot, it's better to go into overtime than to not get it, because once you've moved on from that shot, it's gone.
The bar's been set.
Whereas, once you can't go back, and you'll always be like, and that will stay with the project forever. So, it's often easier to either try and make up time or try and find ways to cover the overtime, and often that's going to be a lesser of two evils than not getting what you wanted to get, because it will plague the project in people. Psychologically, people won't get over that. So more or less, I've tried to stick to that, obviously, and protecting the ability to try and do that, and knowing that to push things on faster when they need to be pushed, to allow the space for those kind of things to happen. And that's a kind of knack, I suppose, that gets developed as you get more experience.
No, that's I love that. I love that, because you're absolutely right. If you just don't get it, then maybe everyone's motivation slightly goes down. Psychologically, they're kind of like, just annoyed, and then it's a circle of
and you can see in your mind the edit where people are just like, oh, shit, if only we, and then it's like, it just, there's like a, Adam, you'll know this. What's the musical term when you have is it a hanging seventh, or like an unresolved seventh, where it's just like, you just don't feel right, and you will never feel right because you haven't got it. So, but like I said, the producing role is, so much of it is around diplomacy and balancing, so many different requirements and personalities and, stresses, and being able to balance them, understand them, absorb them, and then find a system which hopefully will fulfill all of them.
So, like Chris, obviously, like being a producer, as we're hearing, and as we all know, it's an incredibly multifaceted job. And I think now more than ever, where for instance, as an agency producer, you kind of knew one thing, print or art buying or this. Now I feel like everyone has a greater knowledge, almost like directors did. They know a bit about everything, and that's why they're a director. My question is though, with all this like knowledge and time and stress and everything, like what do you do to kind of switch yourself off?
What do I do to switch myself off? Tends to be things which cannot involve a phone. Cycling, probably the main one, just because you have to remain present. You can't really let your thoughts drift too much. You can't be on the phone. You can't be looking at a screen. It's a very good solution to a lot of things.
So here's a question for you, right? Because I was about to ask something very similar to Adam, and I guess we think the same, I think. But look, producing is stressful, right? And I think we kind of just touched a little bit there on mental health and how you kind of de-stress. But how do you cope in that really stressful moment, right, where it's either on a shoot and everything's maybe just coming against you, but how do you cope with that? And maybe if you can, like, what was a low point for you in your career, like that you remember where things just really went against you, and
I
how did you
yeah.
come out of
Go on, Chris. Tell us your worst moment ever.
Oh man, I've got quite a few tough shoot stories. There's one in particular that springs to mind, which must have been about, yeah. So it was when I was at BBH, probably about 2015, and I was producing a project for a washing detergent actually called Skip, and we were doing this interactive music video. It was an amazing project actually, and the concept was we would shoot a full music video with a team of female dancers, and when you watch the video, you could click at any point, and the clothing would instantly change on the dancers, and it was all to show like how the washing. It was like showing the washing powder could do colours and black and whites and blah blah blah. But you could click at any time, and instantly the colours of the colours of the clothing of the dancers would change, and their outfits would change. And you could do that, there would be like 9 different outfits. So it was a really interesting job because it was technically, it was a real puzzle. We had to effectively get a track. We used a Janelle Monáe track, and then we choreographed all these dancers, and then we did a kind of mocap session, did a full previs. And then what we would have to do on the shoot would be motion control. We'd have to get the dancers so tightly choreographed that they could run through the routine in each of the outfits, but their positions would be so perfectly aligned that when you shot it all with motion control, you could skip and effectively jump between the edits, and their body positions would be exactly the same, and it would be seamless. So we were doing we did all the prep in London. We did probably 6 weeks of dance training and previs and stuff, and it all went brilliantly. And we were going off on this shoot. We were shooting in Argentina for budget reasons, but it was one of those ones where by the time we went on the shoot, it was like, this is the easiest job ever. We've already got the edit locked as a previs. Everything's done. All we have to do is go out there and shoot the motion control with the dancers doing the dance, and then we're good. Basically, the edit's approved. So we flew out to Argentina, flew all the dancers out, and from then on, basically it turned out that it was cursed because we flew all these dancers out who'd been, as I said, rehearsing for kind of 6 weeks. The first thing that went wrong, the lead dancer got serious gastroenteritis, and I think 2 days before the shoot, basically ended up on a drip. Pretty quickly, the doctor said she is not going to be dancing. So immediately we're into an insurance claim. We are trying to, no one else knows this dance apart from her assistant who's in Barcelona. So we're trying to get the assistant out there, dye her hair, all kinds of stuff. That was the first in a series of incidents, it was everything from people were getting mugged. One of the dancers was from South Africa. Her husband went missing in South Africa. She was incredibly worried about him.
What?
There were all manner of technical issues. Anyway, we managed to get to albeit a delayed shoot with the new dancer, everyone ready to go. Shoot day 1, motion control explodes. So basically a second insurance claim. It takes ages to fix it. We go into extra shoot days. By this time, we've been there probably about 3 weeks. We're all basically fluent in Spanish by this time because we've been there for so long. And there's so many. It's plagued with technical errors through the shoot. It gets to the point where the director has to leave because he's got another job. We've got this big techno crane which should be back in Europe for another job. We get down to effectively the last day it can possibly happen before we have to all go home and come back 3 months later. And the night before, the crew were like, we think the studio is cursed because so much has been going wrong. So we have to get a shaman to come to the studio and basically cleanse the studio.
No fucking way.
bad spirit. I'm not joking. We actually hired a shaman who came in and overnight basically cleansed all of the bad energy from the studio, because the crew were like, we're not going to keep working in there because one of us is going to have an accident because it's cursed. So then we're on the final day of the shoot. We've basically trying to get everything. Motion control keeps going wrong. The generator explodes. Like, the shaman is in there, and the shaman. You think this shaman was not what you expect a shaman to look like. This shaman looked like a grip, basically. He had a black t-shirt and jeans on and just loads of sage. And this shaman was kind of going around, things would go wrong and he'd kind of go and waft some sage over it. Anyway, we're on the final shot, and then suddenly all the power goes out in the studio and everything's just like, I cannot believe this is happening. We've got about half an hour before the whole thing's just finished. And you've got all these lighting guys just over a fuse box desperately trying to work out what's gone wrong, and it's pitch black in the studio, and the shaman just kind of wanders over to them and just starts wafting sage over, and then all the lights go on, everyone screams. I was like, I don't know what that guy's doing, but just get him to do it everywhere. So he's just like running over, wafting over. Anyway, we finally got it down. It was without a doubt the most stressful shoot I've ever experienced. It was insane. But you know what? I feel like, one of the things that I really relied on as it's been kind of one of my tricks, when you've got so many variables and so many things that could happen and going wrong, and what could happen if this person gets ill, and is like decision trees are like my lifesaver in that situation, where it's just going, right, just break it down, like, if this happens, then that. If this happens, then that. And you map it all out into a graphic, basically, and then go, right, okay, here's all the possible scenarios. Which is the one we're trying to get to, and what steps need to be taken to get there? And just by doing that, actually, you stop being so overwhelmed by the sheer scale of, the mountain you're trying to overcome, and the sheer scale of like the financial fallout if things go wrong, and you just go, right, just break it down into little steps. And actually, from a stress point of view, that just makes it much more manageable and logical. And it's like, right, we just need to follow this path, and everyone can look at it and agree with it. And so I found that to be a really useful thing. And also just laughing about stuff as well, because that's really important. Ultimately what we do is, it's such a, as I said, such a privilege and a luxury. It's such a joy to do, that you've got to enjoy it, even when you're really up against it. So often what you're doing is so ridiculous that you've got to find the humor in it, even when it's looking rough.
There's the captain of the Irish rugby team said, I heard him in an interview a while back, and their whole tactic for those situations of like everything's going horribly wrong is win the tackle in front of your face. Like,
that's so true.
Just win that, the tackle, the battle that's in front of you. Then you get on to the next one. Don't
it's so true.
Just don't panic about all the things that are going on. Just win the battle in front of your face.
It's so true.
I love that. But I was also just thinking of, I like to think of an accountant somewhere at like BBH looking at an expense sheet going, shaman, one big bag of sage, paid for in cash.
I mean, it was
like, really? Is this
shaman.
Not the hooker's dope kind of thing?
It's just absolute lunacy.
Like a lovely way to wrap it up.
Absolutely.
What a perfect ending. So yeah, I think, Chris, it's been such a pleasure to talk, and I hopefully you and I and Adam can do this over a Guinness or a drink.
Anytime. No, thank you so much for asking me, and
No, it's a pleasure.
it's been such a pleasure, and such a pleasure dredging up some old memories as well.
Yeah, they're great. They're great
Yeah,
stories.
beautiful, and it's so nice as well to take away some things, like in terms of the enthusiasm and also to hear kind of the humble beginnings, and how you started at grad scheme level, and you kind of almost took the time to get to where you are now, which I think is a really important lesson. You don't have to kind of necessarily rush things because you want to learn, and the more you learn, the better you'll be. And no, thank you, Chris. Thank you for sharing.
100%.
Amazing.
No, pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been listening to the Production Podcast with myself and my good pal Fionn. And this week's guest was Chris Watling, who at the time of our interview was head of production for Droga 5, but has now started a new role as MD over at Somesuch. So congratulations, Chris, and we wish you all the best in your new role. And if you're liking the show, please share with your friends, colleagues, and we look forward to having you back listening to more of our wicked chats with great people. Speak soon.